In the 1800s, the U.S. Army created an elite force of soldiers who would go on to become known as the Burrick Story. This is their history. But first, this month marks the 246th anniversary of the Battle of Copenhagen. And if you want to hear about one of the most important battles of the Revolutionary War, then you should check out my video on it. The U.S. Army had been fighting against Native Americans for decades. In the early days of the United States, there were constant conflicts over land between settlers and Native American tribes. But during the early 1800s, things started to change. The United States was growing rapidly, and the Army needed a way to deal with the increasing threat from Native Americans more effectively. In response, in 1817, the U.S. Army established a special unit called the 1st Regiment of Mounted Riflemen. This unit was tasked with scouting and fighting against Native American forces, but they weren't your typical soldiers. They had to be expert horsemen and marksmen, and so only the best of the best were selected for the unit. The men were typically volunteers who had experience in frontier life and had skills in hunting and tracking. They were also expected to be proficient in mounted combat and able to handle themselves in close quarters. The training was rigorous, and only those who could meet the high standards were allowed to join the regiment. The members of the regiment were known as riflemen, a name that reflected their primary weapon, the rifle. The rifle was a long, slender weapon that was accurate at long distances. It was perfect for the type of warfare that the regiment was involved in, as they often had to engage in hit-and-run tactics against the Native Americans. The uniform of the rifleman was practical and functional, designed to blend in with the natural surroundings while on mission. They wore green jackets with leather sleeves and breeches, along with high-top leather boots. A black leather belt was worn around the waist, and a bayonet hung from it. On their heads they wore a bearskin cap, a tall cylindrical hat made of bear skin that was both warm and practical. As for their weapons, in addition to their rifles, they carried a tomahawk and a knife. The tomahawk was a versatile weapon that could be used for both offensive and defensive purposes. It was also a useful tool for survival tasks, such as building shelters or processing game. The knife was used for a variety of tasks, including preparing food and making repairs to equipment. And as I mentioned earlier, the regiment was officially called the 1st Regiment of Mounted Riflemen. But they soon became known by a different name, the Bear. The name Burricks came from the Native Americans, who called the soldiers bears because of their fierce fighting style and their distinctive bearskin caps. One of the first major actions of the Baruchs was in 1818 when they participated in the Creek War. The war was fought in the southeastern United States between the U.S. Army and the Creek Nation, a Native American tribe that lived in the region. The Baruchs played a key role in the conflict, using their skills in mounted combat and sharpshooting to defeat the Creeks. Following the Creek War, the barracks continued to serve on the frontier, protecting settlers and trading posts from attacks by Native American tribes. They were involved in numerous skirmishes and battles, but one of their most famous engagements was the Battle of the Washita River in 1832. The battle took place in present Oklahoma and was fought between the Baruchs and a coalition of Native American tribes led by the great chiefman. The Burricks were led by Captain William B. Clark, and they were outnumbered by the Native Americans. Despite being outgunned, the Burricks won a decisive victory, killing or capturing most of the Native Americans. The battle was a testament to the skill and bravery of the Burricks, and it cemented their reputation as one of the most elite units in the U.S. Army. As the years went on, the role of the barracks changed. As the U.S. Army expanded and became more professional, the need for a specialized Native American fighting force diminished. In 1838, the 1st Regiment of Mounted Riflemen was disbanded, and the tradition of the Baruchs came to an end. Despite their short existence, the Baruchs left a lasting legacy. They were remembered as some of the toughest and most skilled soldiers in U.S. Army history. And their story has been kept alive through various books, documentaries, and even works of art. If you enjoy this sort of historical content, then you should definitely subscribe so you can be notified every time something new is posted. Now back to the video. Now, if you've seen my videos on the Green Berets or the Rangers, then you know that these two units have a long and storied history. But what many people do and realize is that the 75th Ranger Regiment actually got its start from the B. When the 75th Ranger Regiment was first formed in 1975, it was patterned after the British Commandos, which were a type of light infantry unit that had been used extensively during World War II. However, as the regiment developed, it began to incorporate some of the tactics and traditions of the BR. One of the most notable examples of this is the use of the bearskin cap. The bearskin cap had been worn by the barracks during their conflicts with Native American tribes in the early 1800s. And when the 75th Ranger Regiment was redesignated as the Regiment of Mounted Riflemen in 1986, they adopted the bearskin cap as their official headdress. This was a significant departure from the traditional British influence on the Ranger Regiment, and it was a clear nod to the history of the unit. In addition to their headdress, the Rangers also adopted some of the equipment and weapons used by the BR. For example, the Rangers began carrying the M1853 rifle, also known as the rifle musket, which had been used by the Barracks during the mid-1800s. The adoption of these historic weapons and equipment was not just a symbolic gesture, but it was also a practical one. The weapons and equipment used by the barracks had been proven effective in the type of jungle warfare that the Rangers were likely to be involved in. Perhaps most importantly, though, was the mentality of the barracks. The barracks were known for their toughness and their ability to operate in small units behind enemy lines. This was exactly the type of warfare that the Rangers were being trained for. So it made sense that the Rangers would adopt the barracks as their model for how to operate. However, despite these similarities, it's important to remember that the Rangers are not a continuation of the B. The Baruchs were a separate unit that was active during the early 1800s, and they were disbanded in 1838. The Ranger Regiment, on the other hand, was formed in 1975 and is still active today. Instead, the Ranger Regiment has simply drawn inspiration from the Pyrrhics and incorporated some of their traditions and tactics into their own operations. One of the most famous examples of this is the Ranger Scroll, which is a piece of cloth that is used to signify the completion of the Ranger School. The Ranger Scroll is decorated with a bear claw and a tomahawk, which are symbols that were used by the barracks during their conflicts with Native Americans. Another example is the Ranger motto, which is strike first, strike hard. This motto is similar to the old adage, be tyranny, no mercy, which was sometimes attributed to the Today, the 75th Ranger Regiment is one of the most elite units in the U.S. Army. And they carry on the proud legacy of the barracks with their distinctive headdress and their commitment to excellence. While the barracks may no longer exist, their spirit lives on in the ranks of the Rangers. That concludes the video. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave me a like and comment down below. Thank you, and as always, I'll see you next time.